Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Nelson Dellis. Nelson, how you doing, my friend?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm excited.
Okay.
As I was saying before we started recording, it seems like lots of people I talk to, their 40s, their 50s, they're like, gosh, my memory's just not what it used to be. I don't know if it's the kids and all the crazy activities and all the stuff we do, but you are a four-time memory champion. You are a memory athlete, which I had never heard that before I did my research. But a memory athlete, which is phenomenal, all the stuff you guys are doing out there. You're an author. Your book's called Remember It. You're a speaker. You've climbed Mount Everest 3 times. Holy smokes, you got a lot to talk about. So welcome to the show, Nelson.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So talk to us a little bit about what made Nelson the man he is today. What got you into this stuff, and what keeps you going?
Oh man, it's a long journey of trying a bunch of things out, and some sticking, some not. I've always had that passion of just kind of going after something and seeing how far I can go with it, and then I move on to the next thing. But for whatever reason, memory was one of those things, but it stuck, and it probably stuck because my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and kind of dealing with that and seeing her go through that, I think it just really impacted me in a way that nothing else had. So I used that fire to train and learn these techniques and eventually win the championship 4 times and turn it into my career and passion. So that's kind of been the catalyst to bring me where I am. But over my whole life, I've always been just naturally curious and dedicated to things that I'm interested in.
So what were your passions before? I mean, I guess were you kind of just in odd jobs and different things before that? Or would you say you had a career going and then fell in love with this?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I was always into, I studied physics and math. I was very drawn to the idea of how the world works. How can I write that down in terms of equations, and think about it from my own mind. And come up with that, So the connection between kind of numbers and the mind had always been there. I grew up speaking other languages, and I always liked kind of things you could do with your mind. And memory, I never thought would have been the thing that ended up being what I did with my mind, because I didn't particularly have a good memory. But I guess that I've always had that interest somewhere tucked away. And it just came out about that time.
So grandma gets Alzheimer's, it sounded like around 2009. Is that correct? Or maybe that's when
when she passed away. Okay. She'd been suffering from it for noticeably for a number of years before, but it escalated quickly at the end,
So it'd be a very terrible disease. I know you're doing a lot of good work in that world, so we'll talk about that later. So talk to us about that path. So you don't just wake up and say, okay, I'm going to be a memory champ and do that. So talk to us about the training, the studying, being a student of your game. What was that like? What was that journey like? Or is it still like?
Yeah, it's still that. But obviously at the beginning, like anyone getting started in something that you know nothing about, you see that there are professionals and people doing these incredibly seemingly unachievable things. And you're like, wow, I don't know if I can get there, but I'm curious, right? You start with that bit of curiosity, and that's what it was for me. And, I think I started by downloading an audiobook by this guy, Dominic O'Brien, who was at the time, the winningest world champion, a British guy. And it just kind of walks you through some of these techniques and convinced you as the listener that this is something anybody can do if you know the techniques and you work on it. So that got me going. I entered my first memory championship, did okay, but met more people, and it just fueled the fire even more. And I said to myself, you know what? This is it. I'm going to just go all out. I'm going to train every single day and see what happens, right? But whether I win or lose, I'm just going to try my best. And the cool thing about memory techniques is it feels like a superpower. So imagine practicing something and you feel like a superhuman. Right. Why would you stop? So that kind of made myself keep going with it. And before I knew it, I was at the level of the top guys and competing at a high level.
Wow. So I know a lot of people, and especially in the business world, we're all guilty of this. I think, let's take the Christmas time. We're in it now. You're going to go to a cocktail party, right? You're going to meet somebody, and and you say, hey, I'm Nelson. And I say, hey, I'm Brett. And then 5 seconds later, I take a sip of my drink and you like said, hey, I'll give you $1,000 if you knew my name. And I'm like, no idea what he just said his name was, right? I mean, you probably got to hear that, don't you?
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
You probably hear that a lot, right? From people like, Nelson, how do I remember people's names? Like, what do we do? So give us some advice, man. What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the number one request I get. And it's a common thing. It's not, it's not anybody's fault. Sure, some people are just naturally good at names, but they're probably employing almost subconsciously without thinking about it, some of the technique or part of the technique that I use. And basically it boils down to paying attention, which isn't that unobvious, but it's how you do that, right? Because most people don't have a method to pay attention. You either are or you're not. And by the time you realize you're not, it's too late. So how can you make a concerted effort to pay attention better? And that's kind of where the technique comes in. Because if you can fool your mind into doing that in a fun way, then you're going to want to do it more often, and then it almost becomes a habit. So what I do when I meet people is I'll, hear their name and I'll turn it into some kind of mental picture. So whatever the name reminds me of or sounds like, I come up with a picture.
Do I want to know what you thought of when you said Brett or when you heard Brett?
Well, this is the thing. So some of these are super boring, but because I do this a lot and I do it for competitions, a lot of very common names I have preset images for that are just right there.
Okay.
So Brett is always like the action of betting, like throwing money down. And it's not, bet isn't Brett, obviously, but it's enough.
But it's a memory jogger.
Yeah, and I've fixed it to that name. So whenever I see that movement in my mind, I'm at a blackjack table throwing down money or playing dice in the streets, whatever, something crazy. It's the name Brett, right? So once you have a picture for the name, then I try to associate that imagery to something about you.
When I keep interrupting, if that's okay, because I got a lot of questions on this stuff. So is Brent and Brett and Brad, is that kind of the same thing, or how does that work?
So Brad is pretty common. Brent is kind of like a variation, I guess, of Brett. So I don't know. I don't have a preset image for that one, but I might use the same one, but just keep a mental note of the end there. Or I might think of something else. That might actually make me think of David Brent, which was the character from the British Office, Ricky Gervais. I used to love that show. If you've seen that show, it means nothing.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the whole thing, right?
My 14-year-old loves The Office now. I mean, he's just fascinated by it.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So you have Brett or whatever image you want.
Yep.
And I'm going to attach it or associate it to something about you. And typically what I tell people to start kind of as a first way of going about this is choose a feature on the person's face. That's usually where you're looking. That's usually what you notice when you meet someone, something about them.
Yep.
And you attach or kind of intertwine that image to that feature. And the idea behind it is that next time I see you, rather than trying to remember what your name is, I'm just going to look or try to recall what I noticed about you, which I'll probably notice again anyways, because that's how our minds work. Yep. And then because of that, you'll remember the name or the image, which will give you the name.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've heard people say, as soon as they say the name, like you say Nelson, I say, hey, Nelson, nice to meet you. I mean, does that play into it at all or not?
It can, but if you make it like an automatic thing, then your brain's really not doing anything extra just by repeating the name. What I like to do is make the name like a point of topic, right? Bring the spotlight onto the name. So we'd be like, oh, Brett, that's an interesting name. Why did your parents call you Brett? Is there a story behind that? It's a little detour you take, but it adds to the whole memorableness of learning that person's name, right? And maybe they have some crazy story that's just unforgettable, right? About their name, For example, me, Nelson, some people ask me why that name. It's a very uncommon name, but it's actually pretty common in South America. And my parents named me after, I don't know if they named me after, but they heard the name and then named me that. After Nelson Piquet, the Brazilian race car driver, won the 1983 Monaco Grand Prix, which they were there for. And they always tell me it was a rainy day, so they just made me, which is not a nice
You're like, I don't need to know that, Mom and Dad.
But it's a heck of a memorable story, right?
That's right. That is I'll probably never forget that. Now I'll know the race car driver. Good. So you also got to work with, which is where I found you, was through Jesse Itzler and Sarah Blakely. Jesse Itzler, extremely successful. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. They hired you to be their memory coach, right?
Yeah.
So here's two extremely high-level, successful people. They're constantly wanting to get better. Talk to us about that experience. What was that like, working with people like that? And they're everyday people just like you and I, right?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, they're super nice people. I love the experience with them. But what I loved about it is that they were so open to hearing what I had to say. Just because they're successful and have multi-million-dollar projects and businesses or billion-dollar businesses, right, doesn't mean that they're perfect or have everything going for them. And they recognize that memory could actually make them even better in their work, in their life, whatever. Because at first I was actually just going to work with Jesse, and then he asked if he wanted if Sarah could join in as well. And I guess, of course, yeah, why not? Right. But they don't have terrible memories or anything, but they have very hectic lives. They have to, they're spinning dozens and dozens of plates that they have to keep up and float. So memory and being able to keep track of things, appointments, names, things you did, things you didn't do.
Yep.
That's key, right? So it was a fantastic experience to kind of jump into their world and see. I thought my life was busy and stressful, but they have a lot going on, and memory is some of the things that can help kind of manage that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there is a lot of stuff, right, that we have to manage, and the better memory certainly helps. So what tips do you have? I know I read something, you were calling it the creating memory places, right? So how do we create better memory places?
Yeah, so this is a technique that's been around for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks supposedly invented it, but there's even evidence that even other ancient civilizations have used some form of it. What it is, basically, you take some kind of place or structure. The Greeks would use a memory palace, is what it was called. So it would typically be like a physical structure that they would imagine. And it would be some place that's real, just mapped into their mind. So they'd close their eyes and think about this place. I guess they lived in palaces back then. Your house or apartment is fine enough. Yep. But basically what you do is, when you're memorizing something, you convert it into imagery, some pictures to help you, visualize it. And then to store it all, to keep it all in order, you put it along a path through this place, this memory palace. And it sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like out of this world a little bit, but it takes advantage of what our brains are naturally good at. And one of those things is spatial information. We just gobble that stuff up, soak it up. And if you think of your house, your house like the back of your hand. It's not something extra you have to memorize. If I asked you to close your eyes and imagine walking from your front door up to your bedroom, you could do that, and you'd have an extraordinary amount of detail too. What's on the left side here in the hallway, pieces of furniture, all that stuff. So if I had a list of, say, 10 items that I needed to do today, all I'd have to do is just start at the front door of my house and imagine a picture for the first thing on the door. Then imagine walking through the door into the entryway of the house, putting the second thing, and just making a little pathway through your house or palace, putting images around. And then when it comes time to recalling it, all you have to do is think of, where did you store this information? My house. Think of the path through your house, and the images should be there.
So if you wanted me to learn 10 names or whatever, and one of them is Tom, I got to put a picture of Tom on my front door, and I'm thinking of is that what you're saying? Something like that?
Yeah, names is a little different because you never know like who you're going to see again. I might meet. Say I go to a party, I meet 5 people, never see them again. Do I want to waste a memory palace on them? I don't know, but maybe one of them I see 2 weeks later, and I need to know their name. So who's to say you should put in a memory palace or not? So with the technique I just shared with memorizing names, you put the image on their person. right?
Yeah.
They are the memory palace.
Yep,
They
yep, yep.
are a kind of a portable memory palace,
Yep,
right?
that makes sense.
So it doesn't always have to be a house. That's just kind of a general
Sure.
explanation of it, and one of the ways the Greeks used to do it. But putting it on a person, like a name, is also, it's a structure, right?
Yep.
That is a space. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to worry about it. The person goes away, and if they show up, they bring it with them because it's attached to them, obviously mentally,
Wireless. Yeah.
wireless. Yeah, exactly.
It's wireless. So talk to us. What do you see besides maybe the name thing of, being at a party or something like that? What do you see the most normal people fail, whether it's just personal life, business life? What can we do better that we can, listen to this podcast and immediately take some action to get better at something? What would that be?
Yeah, it's obviously these techniques can help you remember specific things much better, right? If I could teach you a memory technique for numbers, we could go and test you on numbers and you'd be able to remember more instantly. So there's that kind of direct impact of these techniques. But I feel like more generally, the biggest takeaway that someone can benefit from right now without me even having to say very much is to think about memory in a different way, right? That it's something that we all can do. It takes a bit of effort. There's no way around that. But if you think of information that comes at you in a way of how can I make this memorable? How can I imagine this as a picture? You're suddenly going to see memorizing things in a different way. It's going to be more enjoyable. You're going to have more confidence as things start to stick more. And suddenly your life, memory lapses don't happen as often because you're aware of it. I think nowadays you don't even think twice about it. Sure, maybe some people are like, oh, my memory's crap right now. But that's all it is. There's never any positive thoughts about it. So it just ends up in the dumpster, and it's this self-feeding circle of damage that happens to your memory. And we have these things, right, that just do everything for us, so we never have to use it. So if you start using it, I guarantee you, even if you struggle a little bit, that you will get better at remembering, even without techniques. So
when you're standing at that same cocktail party and you and I, let's say we don't know each other, we're standing there, we're talking, and all of a sudden, when you and I are having a conversation, if you think, hey, this guy's going to come back in my life, obviously you don't know when, but maybe it's a small circle, and so you're probably a pretty good chance you're going to see me. You're doing extra work when we're talking, right? Versus the rest of us may just be chilling and talking. You're kind of doing some extra mind work while we're engaged in a conversation. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, think about it like this. Like, I'm going to give you a very crude example, and it's not always the case, but imagine you're a guy at a bar and you see the hottest girl of your life, or the other way around, and you talk to her. She happens to give you her number or her name. You are not going to forget that, right? Because
that's right. That's right.
Not your life does not. It's not that your life depends on it, but you got some motivation there, right? Exactly. Imagine you could apply that same focus and attentiveness to everything, right? If I met you at a party and I knew that knowing you and your name and maybe some facts about you or your number, if I had it, would give me some kind of advantage down the road, whether it's between advancing our relationship or some potential deal or who knows, just something to keep you in my mind, to keep me in your mind as well. I'm going to make that extra effort to do that,
Yeah. And how important is asking questions during that? I mean, is that a key part of what you're doing, is asking questions versus just you talking?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a specific thing, but I do try to really, be in the moment and invest myself in the person, I think a big problem people have is they're thinking about what they need to say next or something else they need to do. They're not present. But if I'm there with you, I literally want to know who you are and why you have your name and what you do for a living, because that, I know, for one, is going to make it more memorable. And two, here I am with you. I'm invested in what we're doing right now. So if I don't want to know that, then I shouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah. So therefore, you're not going to put it in the palaces or anything like that because you don't really, at the end of the day, care that much. So talk to us about how this then turns into you climbing mountains and all that stuff. I mean, how does that work?
I don't know how it works, but it just kind of happened. I like to do a lot of different things, as I said before, and traveling and experiencing kind of life-changing mental kind of challenges is up my alley. And at one point I was curious about climbing mountains. So I took a course in Washington State in the mountains and loved it. It was one of the most radically different experiences I've ever had in my life at the time. It was difficult, uncomfortable. I actually hated it for most of the time I was doing it, but afterwards realized how amazing of an experience it was. And I loved the mental challenge of it because a lot of it was just plodding along with your thoughts and this voice inside your head saying, this is boring, this is hard, this hurts, let's quit.
Yep.
And I liked being able to squash that voice, or at least kind of confront that voice and battle it out, and see what happened.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of lessons there too, of being able to stifle that voice and to meet that person that's talking in your head saying stupid shit.
Yeah.
So that kind of caught on, and it just kind of became another kind of road in my life. And I tied it all together with my memory thing by climbing mountains for a purpose. And that purpose was to raise awareness for Alzheimer's through a charity that I started. So it all kind of came together,
So, I mean, the planning is obviously critically important when it comes to that. Because again, you don't just wake up and you don't just become the 4-time memory champ. You don't just wake up and say, I'm going to climb Mount Everest today. So talk to us about planning. And so think about a lot of business people listening to this podcast, and they have to plan. And we're in a great time of the year for that, right? What are we going to be thinking about for 2020? Year. And, I've been saying to people, you got 27 days left in this decade. Think about it. We're going to start a new decade. It's That's crazy. True. So talk to us about planning and the importance of that.
Yeah, it's a great point. Nobody just goes and climbs Everest. If you do, you could die. There's a high risk there. But even with the memory stuff, I never said, hey, my goal, 4-time champ, right? No way. And anyone who's going to say that, I mean, there's things you can tell yourself to motivate you. That's fine. But being realistic, that was not kind of a good place to start when you don't even know how to memorize anything from day one, So for me, having these kind of little goals along the way and trying to achieve them, just aiming single-mindedly on that little goal, that mini goal. And then when I got there, aim for another one, slightly more difficult, and so on. This is baby steps, right? I'm not saying anything new to anybody there, but it's the same in mountain climbing too. You have the goal, which is the summit, which when you look at it from the bottom, you're just I'm never going to get there. Sometimes you can't even see it. And if you do, it just looks so far and high up. But what you do is, you look at the rock that's just 100 feet away, and you put your head down and you toil and push through the altitude, and you get there. And okay, that wasn't too bad. Let's do another one, right? And you get higher and higher, and before you know it, you look around, you're on the summit, right. And that applies to everything. The important thing though is that's a very obvious metaphor, but with training.
Well, I think it's crucial, right? To think about how important that is in our own planning, is to think about, okay, maybe somebody's in sales, listen, they've got a 12-month goal that either they've established or their company established. And they thought, gosh, how in the heck am I going to get that done? Well, it's that first sale, and then the next one, right? And the next thing you know, you woke up and you did your deal.
Yeah. And I think what else is important to kind of, so people can build metaphors out of this how they want, but when I'm climbing the mountain and aiming for that small goal, that's the only goal, right? It's not like I'm taking breaks and, painting something on the side or doing some yoga over here. No, I'm just taking steps. That's the only thing I'm doing, right? To get to that thing. Yep. That's the only way I get there. So I'm not saying don't do any other thing at all, but getting to your miniature goals, you got to make it a focus, right? It's easy to get bogged down in a lot of different things, especially nowadays. But you got to kind of be good at weeding out what's not entirely relevant right now to get to that goal, and just work at it on that path.
So what's your process like for that? I mean, did you have a team around you? Is there accountability partners? I mean, what did that look like knowing you're going to go into Everest?
For the Everest thing, I mean, training was one thing, and that was just basically all by myself. But when you're on the mountain, you go with typically a group or a company that helps you with logistics. Yep. And then you're just doing the climbing part from camp to camp. So there's a bit of research going into that, see who's, reliable, good reviews, and trustworthy people who climb the way that I like to climb.
Yeah.
Different companies do it different ways. I like
And they
a little
go all
more.
the way to the top with you?
Yeah. Typically what will happen is you'll climb with a Sherpa,
Yep.
one of the locals, who are highly trained, high altitude. They live up there,
Yeah.
and they are your buddy, and they know way more than you do. I never say I'm a professional mountaineer at all. It's a hobby. I'm an amateur, and these guys are professionals, and they know what they're doing. So you go up with one of those guys, and they help you, and it's kind of it's an interesting kind of partnership, because I don't want to say they take care of you, because you still have to do a lot to take care of
Sure.
yourself, but they're kind of your accountability partner.
Part-time psychologist, probably.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
They're amazing people. I mean, they don't really speak great English, but somehow you communicate with them and they understand you, and they're some of the nicest, most hardworking people on the planet. Yeah.
So again, we'll tie a lot of these kind of thoughts into the Mount Everest, but back into the business world. But you got to have a support system, right? I mean, I know that right, you have a child, you're married. I mean, all those things, right? And so, what's that support system like, and how important is that for your success in Mount Everest or in a business?
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, let's talk about when I started doing the memory stuff. I needed a lot of time to work on the training aspect of things, and luckily at the time I was in a position to be able to spend that time and not have any other kind of distractions or things I had to do that would take away from that time. And at the time I was living with my family. They were very supportive, albeit they thought it was kind of a weird goal. Right. They didn't know what I was really doing in my room so many hours.
Son? Right.
Yeah. But, I couldn't have done it without their help. And yeah, that's a huge thing you need to be able to do what you do. And right now, I'm married with a kid, and I have the support of my wife to do some of these crazy projects. And without her, I don't know if I'd be able to do it.
Yeah. So what's next? What's the next Mount Everest? And don't necessarily obviously mean a mountain, but what's next for Nelson?
Yeah. I'm trying to win a 5th time. That's kind of been a goal for a number of years. My last win was in 2015, and I came close. I didn't compete for a couple of years, but I competed this past year and came in 2nd.
Okay.
It was very close to winning, but that's not enough for me. So try to win that. And then there's a couple kind of memory records I'd like to break.
You have 6, or you were currently holding 2 or 3 of them right now, and you at one time held probably 6 or 7, right?
Yeah. I had a bunch at one point. Some get taken away, win them back. I think right now I have one American record, which I'm really proud of. It's memorizing names, and then I have a few other international ones that are still standing, but could be lost anytime, really. So, yeah.
Well, it's just like the mile, right? First person that run the 4-minute mile, then everybody does it. So you're setting records, and people are, records are made to be broken. So unfortunately, So when you hear the word attitude, what comes to mind?
I think of attitude. No, but it's a great word. There's so many ways to react and respond to certain things, and I think attitude. I think of kind of being consistent. It's how you react to stuff, and if that's always wild and changing, I think it's hard to stay focused and get what you want done. But if the people can use different kinds of attitudes to get different things accomplished. But I think if you have a consistent attitude towards something, I think that's probably the thing to aim for. That's a tough question. I don't know, but yeah.
Very good. So when you think of, and again, we're Nelson Dellis here. So Nelson, how do you define success when it comes to you and your life?
Yeah, success. like being able to execute your passion as much as possible. And I've done that a lot, so I feel very successful, but I can also say I don't feel like I've accomplished everything. I still strive for success. Like I don't
Yep.
feel like I've fully attained it. So that definition might not be 100% correct for me, but I feel like I'm on the right track. There's always more that I want to do. It's hard for me sometimes to be like, no, I did that thing.
Right.
I should feel good and finished and like be able to wrap it up. But I always want to push a little more. And so, yeah, I don't know if I have a closed definition of that, but I know it has something to do with the things that I try to do every day that make me happy.
That's good. I think happiness right there, what you just said, that's key, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
many times people pursue things that may not even make them happy, but they think it's going to make them happy. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I've fallen into that too, but
Sure.
eventually you'll come around and realize that's not what I want to do. That's the thing I want to do. I know that makes me happy. Like not happy, like in a, this is what
Euphoric,
people
right?
like. It's like a true sense of calm and again, being in the moment when you're doing that thing. Like that is to me what being happy is. When you don't think about where else you are other than where you are.
Do you find yourself, I mean, because obviously you have a wife, you have a child, you're trying to be a 5-time champion. Do you find yourself in the moment, or do you find yourself a lot of times maybe thinking about that next goal or that next, again, air quotes here, but Mount Everest, whatever that thing is for somebody listening to this? How do you personally stay in the moment and enjoy that little bath time or that whatever time with your little guy?
Yeah, I have to be very aware of that because who knows? Before I know it, my kid's going to be 5 and he's
Right.
never going to be 1 year old doing those bath times again, And I try to remind myself of that as often as I can, that when I'm with him, it's a fleeting moment. It's never going to be like this again. And, I try to put my phone away and really be there with him because again, that'll also make it more memorable. And in the end, that's all you want, right? Is to leave an impact and to also remember experiences like that.
Yeah, it's tough, I think, when you're on the grind, isn't it? I mean, I got 4 boys, and my oldest, I got 14, 12, 9, and 5. And, my 14-year-old seems like he was just in your situation yesterday, a 1-year-old, right? And now it's
Yeah.
like, he just goes on his own to bed and all sorts of stuff. And it's crazy. But, my 5-year-old said, "Hey, can you just lay with me for a minute? You're exhausted." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yep." Because before long, they're not going to
That
ask you to cuddle, right? And
exactly.
so,
Yeah.
so
So
that's,
it's a balance, right? Because like here, I'm in this call with you. My door is shut. I'm thinking of this, right? This is it. I know I heard a while ago my kid crying, but of course that's distracting, but I know that this is my hour that I set aside for this call with you. And I owe that to you and for my career to do this call as presently as I can. But when it's done, I got to balance it and do the same for him and for my wife,
Yep. So talk to us about your book called Remember It. And I know you've got a book, you've got your YouTube channel, you've got a documentary called Memory Games on Netflix, which I've actually seen, which is really cool. So go check that out. But talk to us about your book.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I mean, it came out last September, actually of 2018, to be clear. And it's basically a how-to book for all the day-to-day stuff that people forget. Names, where you put your keys, where you parked your car. There's even stuff about more complex things, how to memorize a deck of cards, numbers, dates, and appointments, all those kinds of things. And there's a lot of memory books out there, I'm not going to lie. But I try to make mine a bit different in the sense that it was a very visual, handheld thing. Obviously, you can get an audiobook version and a Kindle version, but the handheld thing is really the most memorable iteration of that book. It's got pictures, it's colorful. I did everything that I talk about in the book to this book to make it as memorable as possible. So I really think that helps, especially with such a dry topic as memory, And then also I have a kid's version of that book coming out next year, which I'm also very excited about. Yeah.
Well, to check it out and get that for the kiddos. So that's awesome. So is there anything you can go through with me for a couple minutes? You have one of those things if somebody says, "Hey, just help me be a better memory person or have a better memory in 2 minutes or less or 3 minutes or less. You got anything we can go through and you can use me as your guinea pig to show people? Because you're also for hire, right? People can bring you in for their companies. You speak all over the place. If you're like Jesse Itzler and you want to bring you in for the weekend or something like that, you can do that as well, right?
Yeah, I can. Let's do this. Let me find something here. That's a good one. Hang on.
We're gonna maybe I may
Can you
end up
cut
being
this?
so
Sorry.
bad. Say it again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we cut this?
Yeah, exactly. If this
no.
backfires on me and I look like a fool, I'll be like, that guy's got a terrible memory.
All right, here's a question for you. Do you have any toasts that you know by heart?
Yeah, it's a very simple one, but yes, I do.
What is it?
We learned it when I was real young in the business world. May we prosper, and prosper.
Okay.
It's the first thing that came to mind. It's terrible, but it's the first thing that came to mind because it's what they did every year at the Christmas party where I used to work.
That's a good one. Hang on. There's one here. I want to teach you one, but because it's a cool little memory technique for memorizing like a bit of text, like a line or two.
Okay.
Hang on. Let's see. I really want to find this one for you. I'm sorry. Hold on.
No, you're good. We can edit that out too.
Okay. Good. Here we go. All right. Come on. Sorry, my internet.
No, you're good, man. Well, like I said, we'll edit it out.
Here we go. All right. It's called, this is the quote. All right. May you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead.
May you be in heaven a half an hour before the devil knows you're dead.
Yeah. So this is what you do. If you want to memorize something, that one's not too difficult, but you could apply it to something a little more complex or longer. Basically, what you do is you read it to yourself a couple times. All right. So let me actually post this in your chat here. Hold on. All right, here. I'm going to post it in the chat, right, of our conversation here. This is another way. Yeah. May you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead. All right. So on a piece of paper, after you read it a couple times to yourself, what you do is you write every first letter of each word. Just write it down on paper. If it's capital, you capitalize it. If it's lowercase, you lowercase it. If there's a comma, include like punctuation. So in this case, we would end up with M, Y, B, I, H, capital H for heaven, H, A, H, B, T, capital D for devil, K, Y, D, and then an apostrophe, exclamation. You have it written down?
Got it.
Okay. So now you look at what you just wrote and try to say the quote out without cheating. If you have to cheat or
I'm not
peek,
cheating. I'm not cheating.
No, but if you have to peek, it's okay. But try your best to just say it by looking at the letters.
May you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead! Exclamation point. H was capitalized for heaven and D was capitalized for devil.
That's good. So already that's pretty impressive, right? If you're just looking at a bunch of letters and you already pretty much know, you said it right? So say that a couple times looking at what you wrote.
May you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead! Exclamation point. Again, H and D capitalized.
Okay. So you do that a couple times and then you try it without. So don't look at the other thing I wrote and see if you have it.
May you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead! Exclamation point. H is...
Well, you don't have to say that part, right? That's not part of the toast.
All right.
But yeah, and so it's almost like this magic trick in a way.
Yeah.
You read it a couple times, normal. You write it down. The writing process, I think, is key. And then you read it without most of the letters, just the first letters. And then if you take it away, most of the time it's there. And this works with really long passages of text. I have a video on YouTube where I memorized this stupid, kind of long speech from a comedic film, and I nail it.
Yeah, I like that because it is. I have a black journal. I use everything, and it's if somebody brings something up that reminds me of my journal, I can literally go almost to the not to the actual page, but I know if it's on the left side, right side, top, bottom. I agree. I mean, writing stuff down is a big deal. And I think too about grocery lists, right? Your wife may ask you, hey, pick up some milk and eggs and whatever. And I don't know, I got to write it down. You probably can remember, 15 things and go to the store, but.
Yeah. But if you want, so there's techniques like the Memory Palace that would help you memorize a list without even having to write it down. But writing things down in interesting ways where it's maybe not the complete information will help your brain kind of force the rest of it, and that action alone makes it more memorable.
Got it. Well, good. Where can our listeners find more of you, Nelson? Where are you at? You're on social media now?
Yeah, my biggest one is YouTube. That's where I spend most of my time. I just broke 50,000 subscribers, and
nice. Congrats.
Trying to push to 100K. So if any listeners are out there are interested in memory tips videos, I have a ton. It's all free, right? And I would love a subscriber to subscribe. So.
Awesome. And then on Instagram, I know.
Yeah. My name is Nelzor, Nelzor. And I just post a lot of random stuff, my climbs, memory stuff, my family.
And somebody wants to hire you, where they find you on, you got a website as well.
Yep. Just go to nelsondellis.com and you can contact me on my contact page there. And I can send you details on how this stuff works, what I offer, and we can get started.
Well, very cool. Well, definitely check out his YouTube page. I've been there. It's a lot of great stuff, and just lots of videos. And I think these little brain hacks, whatever you want to call them, are crucial, especially in the line of work that we're all in, the business world, and even just personally. You're at a cocktail party over the holidays. It's good to remember somebody's name because it's your name, and it means a lot to people, right? When you hear it out loud. So.
Oh yeah, just knowing a person's name is a huge advantage. So.
Absolutely. Well, Nelson, thanks so much for being with us on the Circuit of Success, man. Happy holidays and great being with you.
Thanks for having me, man. Pleasure to be on the show.